Welcome to Leadership Live with Anton Gunn. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Today, we are talking about employee engagement beyond the new year. Now, before I get into what I want to talk about, I first want to share with you some breaking news, or when I say breaking news, is hot off the press because the study was just published yesterday, and that is Gallup. And if you don't know who Gallup is, Gallup probably does the largest and the biggest survey around employees and leadership and workplace culture. And what do I mean the biggest? Last year, they surveyed more than 79,000 people in 2024 about their experiences at work. And what they found, what they just released this week, what they just released yesterday, as a matter of fact, is that employee engagement in the United States of America is the lowest it has been in the last decade. The last time employee engagement was as low as it is right now was in 2014. And what do I mean low? That only 31% of employees are engaged at work. That literally 69% of people are not engaged at work. And then about 17% are actively disengaged, which means every day they show up, they're trying to check out even more. Now, I want you to know that this is a problem that I can help you to solve. But I wanted to unpack the problem a little bit more since I got this fresh data that came right off the press. Number one, that the industries that have the highest levels of disengagement or the highest levels of employees not being engaged at work is the technology sector, finance, so banking and finance. So if you work in a bank or you work at a financial institution or any of the sort, disengagement is at an all-time high. Transportation is at an all-time high. And the one that I think is going to surprise a lot of people, professional services. Now, when I say professional services, I want to orient you. What do I mean professional services, or what they mean when professional services? Law firms, accounting firms, consulting firms, any place that provides professional services to people or other companies or other industries. Now, that's not to say these are the only industries that are affected, but these are the ones who literally have the highest levels of disengagement right now, the highest levels of disengagement. And so my context for you is to understand that there is a problem here. And usually this is where the problem comes about. We all start the year off excited. Like January comes, it's a new year. We want everybody to be totally engaged and totally motivated. And people come back to work in January wanting to turn over a new leaf. They literally want to do better in 2025 than they did in 2024. So January is off the charts with engagement, with action, with people working. But because you don't have a systematic plan, strategy, good practices, and good behaviors, by February, everybody has gone back to the same old habits, doing the same old things that they've always done that allows them to disengage, become less productive, less impactful, and more importantly, not allowing you as a leader to feel fulfilled at work because your team is not achieving the goals that were set out, if you set goals at all. So what I want to do for the next few minutes is to give you a game plan, 4 things to focus on, 4 things to do if you want to keep your team invested and keep them engaged beyond the new year excitement, the new year hype. If you want to keep them engaged beyond January, these are 4 things that you need to do. You have to be an intentional leader if you want to keep them engaged. So these 4 things are your 4 intentions that you should have this year as it relates to your team being engaged. 4 simple things. You can write them down, but if you don't write them down, it's fine. This video will live in perpetuity on my LinkedIn page, also on YouTube, and on Facebook. I'm putting it everywhere that I can because I know leaders get their information in different ways. So don't be afraid of getting better in 2025. And the first way you get better is by being intentional to understand how you keep your team engaged. Okay. So let's go through these 4 things, and then I'm going to unpack each one of them. So I'm going to cover all 4, hit the highlights up top, and then I'm going to come back and go in detail about each one and give you a strategy that you can use to execute. So the first thing you should do to keep your team engaged and invested beyond the new year is to set clear goals that matter. Set clear goals that matter. The second thing you need to do to keep your team engaged beyond the new year is to recognize and reward their contributions. The third thing that you need to do in 2025, if you want to keep your team engaged, is you need to build strong relationships with every person on your team. And the fourth thing that you need to do, if you want to keep your team engaged and invested in the long term, is you need to invest in their professional development, invest in their personal development. Okay, so those are the 4 things. So let's unpack each one of them one-on-one. Let's focus on setting clear goals that matter. See, a lot of times what we'll do is we will set goals, but they will be pie in the sky goals. They will be goals that are important to us as a leader, but they have no motivation for the people on your team. That they're not invested in the goal because these are your goals. And the mistake that you make as a leader is thinking that because I got goals that my boss gave me, I should cascade those goals down to my team. Yeah, theoretically, that is how it's supposed to work. But if your team is not bought into your goals, if they don't get any benefit out of your goals, if those goals don't matter to them, and it's just really around whether you're going to reprimand them or promote them or hire them or fire them, those goals aren't meaningful. They're not invested in those goals. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to understand you have to set clear goals that matter. So while we have a few more days left in the month of January, you need to have a goal session with your team, which is lay out your goals that were given to you by your leadership, or maybe you developed them yourselves if you're the senior most leader in the organization. Whatever your goals are, lay them out, okay? And then say to your team, okay, here are my goals. What would be some goals that matter to you that would connect, support, and develop these goals further so we all can win? Have that goal session with your team. I promise you what you're doing at that point in time is not just about setting goals, but you're engaging them in the development process. You're engaging them in thinking through the strategies to achieve the goals. You're being transparent as a leader and opening yourself up so they can understand what the accountability looks like for you and for them for the rest of this year. That's strategy number 1. Host a jam session or a goal session, whatever you want to call it, with your team, and walk through goals that actually matter. Not platitudes, not feel goods, but goals that generate revenue, goals that improve the culture, goals that improve productivity or throughput, whatever your goals are. I don't know what they are. I'm not in your industry, but I know you need to set goals that matter. That's the first thing. There's the second thing you need to do is that once the work starts in February, in March, in April, in May, in June, that entire time, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, you need to recognize and reward your team's contributions to achieving goals, milestones, metrics, outputs, customer satisfaction, patient satisfaction, and whatever it is, you need to recognize and reward your team for their performance. Like I played college football, and there's a reason why after every game, the coach hands out a game ball to the person who had the most outstanding performance. that if you play 12 games during a season, you don't wait until the end of the year to recognize someone for what they did in week 1 or what they did in week 2. You got to do it all along. So I'm telling you, for your individual contributors, you need to recognize and reward their performance. So you need to have a game plan of what rewards and recognition looks like in your organization. You need to develop a plan around that. Also, you want to recognize and reward the team's performance. So if the team does something good together, then you need to reward the entire team. Maybe it's a lunch meeting or a lunch date where you take the whole team out for lunch, or host something in the office that you give everybody the day off. I don't know what it is because I'm not in your industry, but I'm telling you right now, it doesn't matter the industry, that if you want to keep your team engaged this year, you have to constantly, regularly, and strategically reward and recognize their contributions, their inputs, their production. Recognize the individuals, recognize the team. Reward the individuals and reward the team. That's the second thing you got to do to keep your team invested beyond the hype of January as a new year. Now, here's the third thing you need to do to keep your team invested. And that is you need to build strong relationships with each person on your team. Now, I do not care how large or how small your team is. If you have direct reports, you should have a strong relationship with every single direct report, every last one of them. And when I mean a strong relationship, you need to know them just as well as you know yourself. What motivates them, what inspires them, what excites them, what makes them angry, what pisses them off, their pet peeves, their favorite color, their favorite candy bar, where they went to school, where they grew up, and why they choose to work for you. You need to know the answer to all of those questions. And if you don't know the answer to all of those questions, for every person that reports to you, you are not doing the job of a leader. See, the job of a leader is to know and understand their team. Because as President John Adams said, if you can help others be more, do more, become more, then you are a leader. And you need to know your people in order to help them to do that. So here's what I need you to do if you don't really know your people, the answer to all of those questions. And I got a lot more questions that you should know the answers to, but I just gave you a few to get you started. You should schedule a 30-minute one-on-one with each of your direct reports on a regular basis. That might be weekly, it might be bi-weekly, it might be once a month, it might be twice a month. Doesn't matter what it is, you need to have some frequency of one-on-one engagement where you talk about the person and what's going on in their life. That's part one. And then part two, ask the question, what can I do to help you to be better at work? And wait for an answer. That's how you're going to build strong relationships. Those strong relationships will be the foundation of trust, and the foundation of trust will be key to employee engagement. Because so many people in that Gallup study and other studies say that they don't trust their leaders. They trust a stranger more than they trust their manager at work. You can't have that if you want success and good outcomes. So you got to build strong relationships. Now, here's the fourth thing that you need to do, and I'm pretty much done at this point. You need to invest in your team's development. So when I say invest in their development, you need to make sure that you have a budget set aside for this year where you invest in learning and development for your team. Invest in it. What does that look like? Well, I'm going to give it to you in my hood colloquialism, as I like to say. And it ain't really hood colloquialism, but it's a phrase that people are familiar with of a certain vernacular in a certain community. And that is, does your team have the skills to pay the bills? the skills to pay the bills. See, what the skills that pay the bills recognizes that everybody is not talented in the same way, but everybody has the ability to become talented if they have a leader who's willing to help them to develop the skills that pay the bills. So when I say skills that pay the bills, I'm going to lay out for you the following. That the reason why employees are disengaging, according to this Gallup study, as I just read through it, the reason why employees are disengaging is because they don't have leaders and managers who are inspiring and can communicate effectively. So if you're not inspiring and you can't communicate effectively, then the 79,000 employees that took this survey are saying, you ain't a good leader. And that's why they're checking out, is because you don't inspire them. Okay. You don't inspire them and you don't communicate well. So if you don't communicate well, then they're frustrated because they don't understand what's going on. So you have to get to a better place of being a leader that has the skills that pay the bills and making sure your team has the skills that pay the bills. So here's two things you can do. Number one, you can host a leadership development workshop with yours truly. I can teach people the skills that pay the bills, how to communicate, most importantly, and how to be an inspiring leader. That's something that I know and have done for 20 years in the corporate environments that I worked in the public service environments that I worked in, and in the communities that I worked in. Become an effective communicator and inspire people to action. Another skill that people need to develop is innovation. Like, you need to have deliberately creative teams. Deliberate creative teams. And I'm stumbling on those words, but I just want you to be clear that I have a friend of mine. Her name is Dr. Amy Clymer. She has a book coming out very soon in February called Deliberate Creative Teams. This book is phenomenal. I read it. I gave her a review on it. But if you want your team to develop the skills that pay the bills, you got to help them to be more creative and innovative. You got to help them to learn how to communicate. You got to help them to learn how to be inspiring to each other, because there's going to be some tough times this year. You're going to get hit with some curveballs. Stock prices going to fall. You're going to have a scandal of some sort, or maybe your industry is going to get disrupted by AI. I don't know what's going to happen. But when it does, the only way your team stays engaged is if you have helped them to develop the skills that pay the bills. So if you want your team to win in 2024 and keep the same level of energy that they had when they came back to work in January, because we were all excited first week of January. January 6th, we were all excited that week, not excited about January 6th, but excited about getting back to work, focusing on our goals, focusing on our vision, focusing on what we wanted to do this year. But literally week by week, that engagement is going to wane. It's going to wane. And sometimes by mid-February, people have forgot all the excitement at the beginning of the year. Unless you do these four things: set clear goals that matter. Number two, recognize and reward their contributions. Number three, build strong relationships with everyone on your team. And number four, invest in their development. That's their personal development and their professional development. Don't just help your people to be good at the job, you help them be good at life. If you do, they will stay engaged, and you won't be in this 69% of leaders and organizations that have employees that are disengaged. That won't be you. They will be engaged. So if this video helped you, or if you want to help the leader that you work with or that you work for, share it with them. Tag them in the comments. And if there's anything that I can help you with, make sure that you send me a message, because my endeavor this year is to be a tool to be used by leaders and organizations to build a world-class culture and to become the leader that everybody will admire. I want to thank you for watching. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you next week. Take care.